I stand before you today not with fear in my heart, but with faith in my soul, faith that though the night has been long and the road has been rough, the morning is coming, and the sound of justice rolling like mighty waters is drawing near. We have seen oppression try to chain the spirit. We have seen hatred try to dim the light. But I say to you this day, our God is still marching on. Yes, he is marching through the valleys of despair, through the alleys of injustice, through the silence of forgotten voices, and through the storms of doubt. He is marching through the weary hearts of the broken and the hopeful cries of the young. His footsteps are echoing in every act of courage, in every stand for truth, in every hand that lifts another. We may stumble, we may be weary, but let no soul forget, we are not alone in this struggle. We are marching, not by our might, but by his power, and every step we take, from every village to every city, from every whisper to every roar, we march with the assurance that truth crushed to earth will rise again, because our God is marching on. Faith is not passive. It is the fire that moves our feet when the world tries to hold us still. It is not a quiet agreement with fate, not a silent nod to the storm. It is a shout from the soul, a conviction that refuses to be chained. Faith is not waiting in the shadows for the world to change. It is stepping into the darkness with a torch in your hand, daring to believe that light will answer. It is not the absence of fear, but the strength to rise despite it. Faith is the song the heart sings when the world is deaf to your voice, the rhythm in your chest when the noise of injustice tries to drown you out. There comes a time when we must stop asking if we are strong enough and begin declaring that strength is born in the struggle. Faith teaches us that we don't need to have all the answers to begin. We only need the courage to start walking, even when we cannot see the finish line. It teaches us that mountains were never meant to block us, but to prove how high we can climb. And when the forces around us try to tie our hands, chain our spirit, or silence our truth, faith becomes the fire that burns through every lie, every doubt, every wall. There will always be voices that say, "Stay still, don't rise, wait your turn," but faith doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't check if the winds are in its favor. It rises because the truth cannot sit idle. It moves because the soul cannot breathe in chains. And it marches forward, not because it's easy, not because the path is smooth, but because the cause is just, the calling is real, and the God who leads us is greater than the enemy who stands against us. Even in silence, faith speaks. Even in pain, it reaches. It lifts the weary feet of those too tired to walk and gives voice to those too broken to speak. It takes the trembling hand and turns it into a fist of conviction. It lifts the head bowed in defeat and reminds it that we were never meant to crawl. We were born to stand. Faith does not deny the storm, it walks through it. It does not ignore the fire. It endures it and rises from the ashes stronger than before. Our ancestors did not walk through injustice with swords. They walked with faith. They faced water hoses, dogs, batons, not with hatred, but with an unshakable belief that truth would prevail. That belief lives in us still. It calls us to remember that every act of courage begins with a whisper of faith. That whisper may start in a single heart, but it can move a generation. Faith does not shrink in the face of failure. It grows in the face of fear. It says, "I may fall, but I will rise again." It says, "I may be one voice, but I speak with the force of many." It says, "You can try to stop me, but my feet are marching, and my fire will not go out. The road to justice may be long, but every step taken in love echoes in eternity. We do not walk this path for applause, for comfort, or for the praise of men. We walk it because something deep within us knows that right is right, even when it costs us everything. Love is not weak. It is the strongest force the world has ever known. It does not run from pain, it walks toward it. It does not turn its face when injustice cries out. It bends down, reaches out, and lifts up those too burdened to rise on their own. Every act done in love, no matter how small, becomes a seed planted in the soil of eternity. And though the winds of hate may blow, though the storms of resistance may rage, those seeds will take root and grow into something unbreakable. When we walk for justice, we do not walk alone. We walk with the memory of those who came before us, the mothers who prayed with tear-stained eyes, the fathers who marched with blistered feet, the children who dreamed in silence because their voices were stolen. We carry them with us. We carry their strength, their hope, their defiant belief that a better world is not only possible but necessary, and we walk with those beside us, strangers who become brothers, sisters who become strength, voices that rise in unison not out of anger, but out of a shared love for what is good, what is fair, what is holy. Justice is not a destination, it is a direction, a way of living, a way of loving, a way of standing even when the ground beneath us shakes. It demands more than words, it asks for action. It asks us to forgive when it would be easier to hate, to speak up when silence would be safer, to show up when the world tells us to sit down. It calls us to see people not as problems, but as promises, not as threats, but as brothers and sisters in a shared human journey. Every time we choose love over vengeance, unity over division, truth over comfort, we are shaping the future. Our steps may seem small, our victories may feel few, but justice is not measured by what the world sees, it is measured by what heaven records, and heaven does not forget the silent stand, the lonely prayer, the unnoticed kindness. It remembers the march through the midnight hour, the hand held in the courtroom, the song sung in the jail cell, the truth spoken at the cost of position or power. Every moment filled with love becomes a thread in the tapestry of eternity, a story that will be told long after we are gone. Let them laugh, let them mock, let them tell us the road is too long or the mountain too high. We were not made for comfort. We were made for purpose, and that purpose shines brightest when we love in the face of hate, when we rise in the face of cruelty, when we give when the world teaches us to hoard. Justice without love becomes cold law, but justice with love becomes a holy movement. It breathes, it moves, it grows with every soul that chooses to walk not with fists raised in anger, but with hands extended in grace. God does not retreat in the face of hate. He rises through the hearts that choose courage over silence. When hatred roars like thunder and injustice darkens the sky, it is not the noise of evil that wins, but the silence of good. And yet, time and again, God plants courage in trembling hearts, lifts the heads bowed in fear, and says, "Stand." Not because standing is easy, but because the world is waiting for someone to rise. God does not wait for perfect people, for the powerful or the proud. He chooses the broken, the quiet, the overlooked, and gives them voices that shake foundations. He walks through the fire with the forgotten and turns their pain into purpose. It is not always in grand speeches or great stages that he moves. It is often in the simple acts of those who dare to care when others turn away. In every age, hate has shouted loud. It has worn different masks, spoken in different tongues, but its poison is always the same. It feeds on division, on fear, on pride. It tells the poor they are invisible and the oppressed they are alone. It thrives when good men and women believe the lie that their voice doesn't matter. But God is not intimidated by the chaos. He is not silent in the storm. He rises, not above us, but within us, in the teacher who defends the voiceless child, in the neighbor who opens their door to a stranger, in the leader who refuses to compromise truth for popularity, in the youth who speaks life in the face of death. That is where he moves, that is where he reigns, that is how he marches on. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that love is greater than fear. It is standing in the gap when your knees tremble and your voice cracks and still saying, "Not here, not now, not on my watch." It is believing that justice is not a dream to be postponed, but a promise to be fulfilled. And when we act with courage, we do not act alone. Heaven watches, heaven joins, heaven strengthens our hands and amplifies our whisper until it becomes a trumpet. Hate may win a battle, but it will never win the war, because courage rooted in love is unstoppable, and the God of love does not flee. He fights with grace, with truth, with relentless hope. You see, every time someone speaks up for what is right, every time someone forgives instead of retaliating, every time someone chooses compassion when cruelty would be easier, that is God rising again. That is the divine marching through the ordinary. That is eternity breaking into time through the boldness of a soul that refuses to be silent. We are not powerless. We are not abandoned. We are vessels of something far greater than ourselves. And when the darkness tries to convince us that we are too small, too late, too broken, God reminds us that He has always used the unlikely to do the impossible. History was never changed by those who played it safe. It was moved by those who listened to the whisper of heaven louder than the shout of fear. And when we answer that whisper, when we take even one step toward justice, one step toward truth, one step toward love, we find that we are not walking alone. We are walking with power, with purpose, with a God who does not sleep or slumber. We march not because the path is easy, but because the calling is holy. The footsteps we take are not led by convenience, not guided by comfort, but compelled by conviction. Deep in the soul of every person who chooses to rise against injustice, to stand against hatred, to speak against silence, there is something greater than personal desire. It is purpose. It is the awareness that we are part of something bigger, something sacred, something eternal. The march for justice, for dignity, for truth is not simply a political act. It is a spiritual one. It is the echo of heaven moving through the earth, the pulse of divine love beating in human hearts who refuse to be numb to suffering. The road has never been smooth. It is marked by resistance, by ridicule, by moments where it feels like nothing is changing. But we do not walk for applause. We do not walk for comfort. We walk because we are answering a call that began long before us and will continue long after us. It is the same call that led Moses through the desert, that carried prophets into exile, that lifted voices from chains and prison cells and rooftops and pulpits. That call is not whisper to retreat. It is a cry to rise. It is a trumpet that shakes our complacency and calls us forward, even when the ground feels like it's breaking beneath us. There will always be reasons to sit down. Fear will give you 100. Doubt will give you more. The world will tell you that marching makes no difference, that speaking up changes nothing. But deep inside, the truth burns. It tells you that every step matters, that every voice counts, that every time you choose to show up when it's easier to disappear, you are helping to bend the arc of the moral universe just a little more toward justice. That arc does not bend on its own. It bends because people, ordinary and extraordinary, put their hands on it and refuse to let go. There are moments in this journey where the weight feels too heavy, when tears fall more often than cheers, when the night seems to stretch endlessly and the dawn feels distant. But it is in those moments that we must remember we were not called to ease, we were called to impact. We were not invited to the march because we had it all together. We were chosen because we were willing to stumble forward, willing to lift someone else, willing to believe when others have stopped hoping. That willingness, that surrender to something greater than ourselves, is where the sacred meets the struggle. Our feet may ache, our voices may tire, our hearts may break, but the holiness of this path gives us strength we did not know we had. It connects us to those who have marched before us, to those who march beside us now, and to those yet to come who will follow our footprints. This is not just history in motion, it is heaven in motion. And when we step forward in love, in faith, in unshakable commitment to what is right, we are not simply protesting, we are prophesying. We are declaring with each movement that evil does not get the final word, that justice is not a fantasy, that love is stronger than hate. The soul of a nation is tested not in comfort, but in how it treats the voiceless and the unseen. It is not the wealth of its banks or the height of its buildings that define its greatness. It is the way it bends to lift the weary, how it listens to the cries of the forgotten, how it protects those who cannot protect themselves. A nation's character is not written in headlines or parades, but in the quiet moments where it chooses mercy over judgment, inclusion over indifference, compassion over convenience. In the hidden corners of its cities and the neglected hearts of its people, the soul of a nation is either nourished or neglected. True greatness does not rise on the backs of the broken. It rises when the strong kneel to lift the broken back to their feet. A just society does not turn away from suffering, it moves toward it. It does not ignore injustice. It confronts it, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is uncomfortable. The soul of a nation is shaped in its prisons, in its hospitals, in its shelters and its schools. It is shaped in how it treats the elderly, how it welcomes the immigrant, how it uplifts the child whose dreams are too big for the zip code they were born into. And when a people begin to see those who are unseen, when they start to hear the voices that have long been silenced, then something begins to stir in the heart of that nation. Something sacred, something mighty. A nation can have laws and still lack justice. It can have freedom and still deny dignity. It can have peace on paper and turmoil in the soul. But when we begin to center the lives of those who have lived in the margins, when we begin to write policy with empathy, when we begin to build systems not to control but to empower, then we are tending to the very soul of who we are. The soul is not protected by power. It is protected by love, not by dominance, but by dignity. And every time a citizen chooses to stand up for someone who cannot stand alone, every time a leader listens with humility, every time a community rallies not just for what benefits them, but for what blesses others, that is when the soul begins to heal. The soul of a nation cannot be bought, cannot be inherited, cannot be built in boardrooms or stock exchanges. It must be fought for in classrooms, in neighborhoods, in courthouses, in hearts. It is a living thing, and like all living things, it needs care, it needs sacrifice, it needs truth. It needs people who are brave enough to speak even when their voice shakes, who are kind enough to serve even when no one is watching, who are honest enough to say that we still have far to go. Because admitting the truth is not weakness. It is the first step toward transformation. We are not judged by how high we rise, but by how far we reach. Not by what we keep, but by what we give. Not by the noise of our pride, but by the depth of our love. When the soul of a nation aligns with the values of justice, grace, and humanity, it becomes more than just land and laws. It becomes light, light that guides, light that welcomes, light that refuses to flicker out in the face of darkness. When we stand for righteousness, we don't stand alone. Our God is marching on. There is a power that walks beside those who choose truth over popularity, justice over comfort, and love over hate. To stand for what is right in a world that rewards silence and Conformity is not an easy thing, but it is a holy thing. It is in those very moments when you feel small in the face of opposition, when your voice feels like a whisper in a world of noise, that heaven draws near. That is when the divine steps in, not as a distant spectator, but as a present help, marching in step with those who will not bow to fear, who will not kneel to injustice, who will not surrender their light just because the darkness is loud. The history of every great movement was built not by the mighty, but by the faithful, those who stood when it was dangerous to stand, who spoke when it was costly to speak, who marched when their legs were weary and the path ahead was filled with threats. They knew what we must know now, that when you stand for righteousness, you never stand alone. God has never been neutral in the face of evil. He has always stood on the side of the oppressed, the broken-hearted, the cast aside. He does not wait for the fight to be over to join the side of good. He moves in the midst of the battle. He strengthens the weak, honors the humble, and brings down the proud. You can feel his presence in the courage of a child who speaks truth in the classroom, in the resilience of a mother fighting for her family's future, in the boldness of a man who refuses to participate in systems of hate. God does not just march in temples and churches. He marches in courtrooms where the guilty are falsely accused, in neighborhoods where hope has been evicted, in schools where dreams are neglected. He is not limited by place or time. Wherever righteousness is defended, wherever justice is pursued, wherever love becomes an action and not just a word, he is there, he is moving, he is marching. We often look around and wonder if we're enough, if one voice, one heart, one act of kindness can really matter in a world spinning so fast in the opposite direction. But the truth is, God has never needed a crowd to change the world. He's only needed one willing heart, one faithful soul who will say, "Here I am, send me." And once that heart begins to move in righteousness, it doesn't move alone. It is joined by unseen armies, by generations of faithful who have walked before, by the breath of God that whispers strength into every step. So when you find yourself standing on a shaky platform, surrounded by doubt, criticized by those who don't yet understand, stand anyway, because you are not standing on your own. You are standing on a promise, walking on purpose, backed by the Creator of justice himself. Every time you lift your voice in the name of what is right, every time you extend your hand to someone in need, every time you sacrifice comfort to defend dignity, heaven takes notice. You may not always feel the ground shake beneath you, but know this, eternity moves with you, because our God is not still. Our God is not silent. Our God is marching on.